We are starting the meeting. Thank you. And we'll start with the roll call. We'll note that every board member is in attendance. That's terrific. The next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite everyone in the room to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is the approval of the agenda, and this is an action item. I'll hear a motion that the board approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Jill, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Charles. We ready to vote? Let's vote.
Kathy, will you enter my affirmative vote, please?
So I didn't make the motion.
Yeah, I'm not coming up.
I know, I fixed it. Okay.
You just do verbal if you have it.
We're off to a
Do we
great
have-
start.
Well, this is not good. Is everybody affirmed? I'm just gonna mark your hand.
Yeah, but I voted. I mean, mine came up, did you?
Yeah, mine came
Yeah,
up.
Jill's came up, Charles came up, Tim came up.
Boy, mine comes up. Bruce saying.
Bruce?
Aye.
Bruce says aye.
Aye.
Jerry says aye. All right. You may want to check and see if the same thing happened to them that happened to me, where they didn't necessarily sign in on the join the meeting. You may want to check that.
I signed it.
Okay, all right, all
I
right.
know what I'm doing.
The next item is public
I want
comments to address agenda items, and we do have someone signed up to speak, but that will be later in the meeting for non-agenda items. There are no others? Okay. Then we'll go on to item 3.01, which is information reports, and there are no information reports. So we move on to 401, which is preliminary contracts, agreements, and change orders and bids.
So we are posting these for your review at this time, and you'll have the next 2 weeks. We'll ask you to approve this listing at the October 15th meeting. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those or call on a colleague to assist me in that. If you have any specific questions?
Any questions for Carol? All right, we will consider
weeks.
this in 2 weeks.
And feel free to reach out to me if you come up with any questions in the interim.
Item 5.01 is board policy adoptions and revisions. There are some, and so they are posted for your review between now and the 15th, and we will then consider them for vote on the 15th, assuming someone makes a duly made motion.
This is the first set of the 2019B that came from MSBA, so we've had these through administrative review, pushed them to you, and we'll have a few more over the next couple months. Let us know if you have any questions between now and then.
Is it common, John, to have one that includes visitors to district property and medical marijuana in the same policy?
It is now.
Yeah.
As I had previously, no, but yes, now. So it's a new part of the world, so.
We'll just leave that there.
There you go.
Probably, yeah,
So common, no, but yes, it is current, so.
Welcome to the world.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of, with Missouri law being what it is, but federal law supersedes,
Right.
et cetera, so it has to be consistent with both.
and that's where it
Very-
sits.
Puts us in a very strange place, as we know,
We
All
should
right.
stay out of the weeds.
All right, enough. Really.
Let's move along to new business. There's several new business items. The first one is 6.01, which is the approval of transportation routes.
Please rescue us.
Welcome, Travis.
You're on your own on that.
Oh my gosh, that is
on the
Out of my jurisdiction.
It's on the high road, right?
So it's that time of year again when we bring for you the review of our bus routes. And if you read through them, there are 25 full pages of bus routes that I'm sure you can make a lot of sense of. But Missouri law does require that boards of education approve bus routes by the end of October. So this is for your first review. Just some things to note that we do utilize 132 different buses daily. and that is for our morning and afternoon routes, as well as 44 additional midday routes, which transport total throughout the day about 7,700 students. And we drive about 10,000 miles every day and also nearly 2 million a year. So that's partly why there's 25 pages of bus routes for you to look at. But I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any at this time.
Any questions for Travis? Yeah, Jerry?
Does the fact that nobody can find bus drivers impact the routes as far as the number of routes, or you just do the routes and then find what you can? I know everybody's having trouble finding bus drivers.
We don't usually let the driver shortage, if you will, dictate
Okay.
our routes. We have our routes that we have 3 full-time routers, that is their job to be as efficient as possible. And initially, we thought we were going to have 134, and we only needed 132 based on how we could route, which then helps with the driver shortage if we got it. But I will tell you that the change in compensation for our drivers has drastically made a difference, and we are in as good a place. We're still not quite there, but we're in as good a place for our bus drivers and employment as we have been in a few years. So positive news there.
That's good to hear.
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. As we consider this for a vote, this does not negate the consultants reviewing transportation routes moving forward.
That's correct. This is just for this year.
No, that will run independent of the work that's occurring on a daily basis, and they will certainly review all of our routes and determine if there are efficiencies to be found additional.
Anything else for Travis on this item? All right, we will be considering that in 2 weeks also. Also for first read is a separate but somewhat related item,
Correct.
transportation bus purchase.
Last month, we received bids for 8 77-passenger buses. The cost also included adding additional storage for luggage, as well as 50-passenger seat upgrades that include some 2 integrated child restraint systems and also 3-point lap shoulder belts where those are needed. We don't obviously equip the entire bus. We do some. That allows us to move those throughout the fleet as needed. And the reason we have the 50-passenger seat upgrades, that allows anytime we need to move those seats to accommodate that very quickly, and to do it up front makes it a much more efficient, cost-effective way to do things rather than retrofitting later. The recommendation that we'll be bringing to for your approval at the next meeting will be for Midwest Transit equipment at a total of $896,508, and this is budgeted through our capital projects budget. We actually had $900,000 budgeted for this, so we came in just a few thousand under to purchase these 8 buses. So,
All right, any comments or questions for Travis on this? We'll vote on it in 2 weeks. Thank you, Travis.
thank you.
6.03 is the 2020 legislative platform. John?
Yeah, so timeline for this is, I told you it would be coming to you. This is last year's platform. It's our starting point. And we will have put it in your hands now, and we typically adopt in November. So you have a month to kind of mull it over, give feedback, consider MSBA modifications. I know other organizations may be giving feedback, kind of get a lay of the land politically. I know you've got some feedback at the conference over this weekend. So this gives you a starting point. I think we've got a pretty good structure that we've established over the years regarding our beliefs, our priorities at state level, and then our position statements that help really, as I serve as lead lobbyist on a regular basis, engage with legislators, but it also gives you the messages to know what the board speaks for, right? So we have positions that we can speak to certain issues, and then if other issues come up, we've had that discussion historically during the session. Sometimes something that's not covered in this comes up, and then we can bring that issue individually to the board for review. But this is pretty all-encompassing of the stuff that's traditionally been on the agenda, but there's always occasional new items that come up. So think of the stuff that you heard at MSBA, and maybe some of if you sat through a couple of legislative sessions, you'll know what is on the radar. So if there's any modifications, updates, this will be the time for us to do that in the next 30 days. So next meeting, if you have anything specific feedback, this will turn to old business or unfinished business at that point, but we'll take feedback over the next two meetings with hopeful formal adoption at the November regular meeting. And then we follow that up, if you remember, with a December meeting with our legislators, where we ask them to come join us typically prior to the December board meeting, where we kind of present the platform and the positions as we kick off in session. Also during that time, I typically try to meet with every legislator individually at a school site to do a school visit to go over the platform and positions one-on-one. And you're always welcome to attend some of those as necessary. So that's the process. If there's anything that you want me to capture tonight, I'm glad to do that and start researching, or you can start to look it over, take notes, send them to me by email, or bring the feedback to the next board meeting, and we'll begin to update the platform and positions to represent what you want in this year.
All right.
Any initial things that we need to know? So,
Anything for John?
perfect, thanks.
Yeah, we heard a lot at the conference this past weekend, and our engagement seems like it's going to be needed this upcoming session as much or more than ever. All right. This one's kind of fun. Item 6.04, Early Childhood Center Naming Committee.
It is fun.
All right,
Thank you
all right,
for
all
that. I was so excited. So, you may recall, back in January 2016, we had the opportunity to name the Roseanne Bentley Administrative Center. And in doing so, we followed Board Policy FF, which governs how our Board of Education must go through a process to name a new building or structure. And in keeping with that policy, we need to provide you with a recommendation for community member names and administrator names and staff names and student names ultimately. So you'll note that I've updated the recommendation posting for this evening, and this is a first read. We're not asking you to vote this evening, but I'm super excited to share with you the final committee recommendation, and you know that that is from me reaching out to each one of you for your input on who would be great representatives from the community perspective. So we have for you this consideration, Mike White, who would absolutely be delighted to serve. He served along with Jim Anderson on the previous committee for Roseanne Bentley. Charlotte Harden, so she was a previous board member, and she is very excited about the opportunity. Mike Homan, who also is a previous board member. And then Dana Carroll, whom we know to be very highly engaged in early childhood and providing those services in our community. So that would be the community membership list. From administration, we would have Missy Riley, who is our director of early childhood programming. And then we would have two teachers who currently serve as early childhood teachers, and Missy would help with that identification piece. We also, because the policy calls for student participation, we would recommend that perhaps the Parkview Student Council President serve, and also the Kickapoo Student Council President serve, because those are the feeder schools for this attendance zone. So, very excited. The timeline for this would be after your approval of this committee at the October 15th meeting, then I would work with the team to schedule meetings. And because this is board policy, a board-appointed committee requires that we honor sunshine rules and regulations, and so all meetings would be posted and open to the public as we would journey through that, and minutes would be provided. So,
Any questions, comments for Carol? We will consider this at our next board meeting in 2 weeks.
thank you.
Item 7.01 is unfinished business, and there are no unfinished business items. So we asked Travis to come back up and for Section 8, which is the 2019 bond project updates and actions. The first one is a series of change orders.
So I have a few change orders that are relative to Package 2 on the secure entrances and also Package 3. You'll notice in Package 2 that the total additions is $15,381.71. The largest part of that is to do some additional construction work needed at the Carver secure entrance. If you're familiar with that site, we brought the secure entrance up toward the front because of the APR on the right, or the cafeteria on the right, the gym on the left, the office is way down the hall. And when they designed that, There wasn't plans in the design to actually secure that space. It essentially was an office sitting inside of a corridor, and so once that staff member's gone, because that is the main traffic flow for all of the events, all of that, the desks, the computer, all of those things would be sitting there, and so we have to secure that space, and so it was something that was left out of the design, and so that does have a construction contingency available of almost $176,000. And then you'll see package 3, some very small items, adding some electrical outlets with a contingency availability of $459,109. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Any questions for Travis? Now, as a board, we agreed that we would operate an exception to our custom of having a first read, second read on these construction items so that we could expedite the work. So the recommended action is that the board approve the change orders tonight as presented. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, Alina. Is there a second?
Second.
Charles? Any discussion on the motion? We ready to vote? Please vote. The ayes have it, and so we move on to 8.02, the playground relocation at Sunshine Elementary.
In the bid specs at all of our projects was to state that a certified playground installer was to remove and relocate playground equipment where necessary, and for reasons unknown to us at SPS, that language did not make it in Sunshine and therefore was not part of the contract. So to move these pieces, an ADA swing, bay swings, picnic table, basketball goals, we are getting a scope of work from Ozark Installations rather than running it through the contract. We can expedite it. It's simpler to do it this way, and we can relocate this. They are a certified playground installer, and so this wouldn't be a change order to the contract, but it does come out of the construction contingency budget, which you'll see has $452,126 remaining in it. So we can get this relocated because it sits right in the middle of where phase 2 construction is, and we're ready to get started with that within just a couple of days.
Any questions or comments for Travis? I did notice that they are real close. Did they pave the bus lane today? The car lane?
The asphalt should be laid on the bus lane and parking area on the west side, yes.
Yeah, I drive by there every day on my way home, and they have really moved on that.
Yeah,
It's nice to see.
Yeah, the office will be relocated as well as part of that to the southwest corner of the building. So people won't be walking all the way through the building to get to the office anymore. This will be a temporary location, but it'll be a much better location. So.
All right, so the recommended action is that the board approve the construction contract for this $6,900 relocation effort as presented. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, Jill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Charles. Any further discussion on the motion? We ready to vote? Let's vote. Please. Ayes have it. Motion passes. So the next item is 8.03, graphic design at Boyd Elementary.
So the graphic design work, as they call environmental graphic design, is not part of the original construction contract with our architects for all of that design work. It's completely separate, that they get a graphic designer involved and then they work through with our team to really make, this is what makes the inside of the space creative and beautiful and goes along with all of the themes. And so this is a separate contract from what the original contract was, but it does take all of the exterior signage, the room ID signage, puts together a wayfinding package, puts all of those things to where it meets and really exceeds what just normal design would be, as well as the development of artwork and shop drawings. And so this is a $30,000 architect fee. It is separate from their original cost. We do have still $1.7 million left in the design contingency or soft costs, if you will, budget. So this is completely separate. You may be asking about, did we approve this for Delaware and Sunshine? It was several months ago, but because it was several months ago, we weren't going through this process. It was through the normal contracts, agreements, change order bids, which went through the 2-month or 2-meeting approval process. So that's why it wasn't something specific that I brought to your attention.
Paris, can you explain a little more what a wayfinding package is?
That's so you can get from point A to point B throughout the entire building and know exactly how to get there. So that's essentially.
I'm
this-
looking at the design.
Well, once you're inside the building,
Yeah.
it's a matter of signage and,
Okay.
and how you get,
Got it.
you know, where's the APR, or where's the cafeteria, where's the gym, where's
That's
first
important.
grade, those kind of things, so.
That is important. Okay.
And again, it's not just normal signage, it's actually signage that goes all along with the entire design of the building that isn't just a black and white sign, but really fits within the whole theme, so.
Anything else on this? On this? Well, the recommended action is that the board approve the construction contract as presented. That's actually a design contract, but as presented. Is there a motion?
I'll make that.
Thank you, Denise. There a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bruce. We ready to vote? Let's vote. Thank you, Travis. All right. We're on item 9 now, public comments to address non-agenda items, and I do have one speaker, one only. Before I invite the speaker to the podium, let me read this public content. The Board of Education allows comments on topics not related to the printed agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes for each speaker and will be timed by the board secretary. It's inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the schools or in the district office. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to comments and/or concerns from the public, but will not comment or engage with speakers during the meeting. If you have materials that you want to share, please provide them to the board secretary prior to speaking, and she will distribute them to the board members. So our speaker is Tim Havens. Tim, welcome, sir.
Well, I wasn't going to speak tonight, but thought the subjects looked kind of dry, and I thought you could use some uplifting.
This better be good then.
All right. On the last subject of how the graphics get around in the building, I would suggest a series of colored zip lines. Your students would love them. They'd get there faster. Nobody'd be late. Everybody'd come to school. Last.
And the litigation that goes with that.
Sure, I can come back and talk again. But last time I was here, I talked about a series of TED Talks and a big program that would involve enough presence in the classroom to make it meaningful from up to 16 times a year in each class. And I still think that can be done. I think it's a good idea. The comments I've had on it seemed positive. I hate to let that idea lay on the table and go away. I would like to rush into a trial test at a school with an approved list of speakers and topics. One of the topics that I just thought of was a little book you have in all the libraries called Henry's Little Box of Freedom. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or not, but it's about a child that's a slave, and he builds a little box, and he mails himself to the north to freedom. And I think it's an award-winning book. I think kids would love it, especially if it's presented by the right person. You have some people on staff that could do it in this trial run, or we have people in the community that could. But I had a little bit different thought too. Why do we need to have black teachers? Why is this such a priority? And it's because statistics show that black children are 40% less likely to drop out of school if they have a black instructor at some time in the first 4 years of their schooling. So that really, to me, made it a priority. But I also got to thinking about the Brown versus Board of Education ruling and separate but equal. And the idea is to give all children an equal education. And if we deny a black child black instruction, we are not giving that child an equal education to the white child who has all white instructors. And in the opinion of some of the educators back in Topeka at the time of this decision, they thought that we were mishandling this, that we should have integrated the teaching staffs before we integrated the students. And I heard some of them interviewed and expressed that opinion. But but the idea is if we can't provide them as a school system, then the community needs to step up and provide these people as volunteers. It's that important to do. And we need to live up to the Brown versus Board of Education, at least morally, in that we need to offer all these students the same value in their education. And a black child does not have a public education of the same value as a white child. So that's what I have to say, but if you have any questions, I like to talk. So.
Thank you, sir.
No questions. Thank you.
All right. We've been at this for 30 minutes. I think we're getting ready to go into a period where it'll be a pretty long presentation. Are we good to
Yes.
go ahead? All right. So the next item is a strategic discussion, and we welcome Shane to the podium. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So it's my role beginning to kick the strategic plan update off for you tonight. It is Focus Area 1, Goal 2, end of year report. So just for some review, end of year report, it is October, but it's reviewing last year, 2018-19 school year. And again, just a few review slides here that you've seen before, but in our strategic plan, we do have 4 focus areas. This one is under Focus Area 1, Student Success and Learning and Support. We have Focus Area 2, Focus Area 3, and 4. As I said, under Focus Area 1, Student Success and Learning Support, it is Goal 2. So I'll read it to you there, but it's access to engage relevant, personalized learning experiences. So for a little clarity, under Goal 2, there are 6 total strategies. For tonight, we will be centering on the top 4 strategies deployed within Goal 2. These are going to be, these 4 strategies will be presented tonight. We'll have the other 2 at the next presentation, October 15th. So the reasoning behind that is a couple things, sheer size and heft of the presentation. If we did all 6 in one night, we probably would need a break in between. And then the other piece is that there is some timeline on the last 2 as far as the release of the APR. So we weren't able to publicly release some of that data until that's released in early October. So those 2 strategies, academic growth and grad rate, will be presented at the October 15th meeting. Just again, a quick review here of our district enrollment that you see within each of our strategic updates, 24,600 plus students. See our free and reduced and full paid lunch statuses, and then our subgroups broken down for you. And again, this is the count, official count as of January 30th. We have it broken down a little bit further by elementary, middle school, and high school. Over 11,600 kids in elementary, middle school 5,800, and high school 7,100. Again, the subgroups and lunch status are there for you below. So again, just kind of some explanation, nothing new here, but to review that there are priority metrics and process measures. There are 4 priority metrics included in this presentation: the percent of students in extracurricular activities, student feedback on school and teacher relationships, student feedback on classroom engagement, student feedback on school engagement. So those are the 4 priority metrics that you will see within this presentation. And then there are process measures as well. So process measures are those data points that are not included in the priority metrics, but are monitored by individual departments. So just some examples include number of students enrolled in virtual learning courses, number of children screened for early childhood programs, and then students participating in Club Encore and Explore. Okay, so that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first strategy within Focus Area 1, Goal 2, and that is extracurricular. So it reads increased participation in extracurricular and after-school programming for students from diverse and under-resourced backgrounds. And it's my privilege to introduce our district Athletic Director, Josh Scott. I think you know Josh. Welcome him to the podium, and he's going to be the one leading you through the next slides that are centering on 1.2.5. So welcome, Josh.
Good evening. Thanks for letting me join you and try and help you understand a little bit of our data that we have through. And obviously, this goal has not changed from last year. We want to try and build a connectedness and an engagement with our students. We feel like if we can grab them with extracurricular after-school activities, we're going to keep them in school. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to perform better and be more successful students. It shows nationally students that are engaged in an extracurricular activity are going to demonstrate a higher GPA attendance along with lower number of disciplinary infractions across the board as opposed to students who are not engaged in athletics. I have a lot of graphs here, a lot of data here, more data than I'm used to, but kind of to go through here. All of these comparisons are going to be comparisons of 2018 to 2019 fiscal years. And as you read these, as we train our eye, the number on the left, the first or the second column, is going to be our fiscal year 19 percentages. And the differential is the differential from 18 to 19 and where we are. So this first graph is for our comparisons between 18 and 19 for 6 through 12. So middle school and high school, looking at it. So training our eye, the way it is coded, green are our positives. Our percentages went into the appropriate or the correct direction. If you look down at the bottom, ELL students increased district-wide percentage by 2%. And unfortunately, the red highlight on this chart is negative, where our non-ELL students in high schools decreased by 1% in participation across the board. The second graph that we have, so this is 6 through 12, the second graph we have is our gap closure. And obviously what we are doing is when you look at key subgroups, we are trying to close our gap. So this one, our percentages and our numbers are actually inversed. So a positive in this one is bad. So the positives are highlighted in red because we want our gaps to get closer together instead of our gaps growing. So when you look at this, for example, I keep looking down and it's on this beautiful, great screen in front of me. You don't need it. If you look at Hispanic versus white population across the board district-wide, we closed the gap by 4% for participation in activities, extracurricular activities. Some major statements. High schools had the highest increases in extracurricular activity participation. Our largest increase were with Hispanic students at the high school of 5%. Black students at the middle school and high school levels increased extracurricular activities by 4%. And our largest gap increase in students were between IEP students and non-IEP students at the middle school level, and between free and reduced and full pay students at the high school level, 5% and 4% respectively. And our largest gap closure, which is what we're trying to do and what we're pushing for, was between Hispanic students and white students at the high school level, and we were able to close that gap at a 4% rate. This chart is looking at our extracurricular activities, 18, 19. Did I go the right way? I went the wrong way. Nope, I was right, sorry. Looking at this are subcategories 6 through 12, and this is clarifying the three groups that we divided our extracurricular activities in. We have a co-curricular piece, which is a piece that is related to a class, so band, choir, scholar bowl, speech and debate. We have our after-school programming, which we really ramped up in the last couple of years with middle school engagement clubs, or any club that you would traditionally see at the high school and middle school level. And then we have athletics, which is mostly thought of your MISHA athletic sports across the board, plus archery is inside of our athletics function. So those are the three subgroups or three categories that we discussed. Your gap closures, again, we are back to that aspect where our numbers are inversed. A positive number is bad on our gap closures because we're wanting to get them to decrease. And you bring your attention up there, Hispanic versus white students, we decreased our gap, which was positive across co-curricular, after-school programming, and athletics. So that's what we are attempting to do across the board.
Josh, do you have, I mean, you may get to this later, do you have any tentative explanation for the increase in the gap, say, between ELL and non-ELL students? In after-school activities and much smaller increase in the gap in athletics?
Sure. I don't have one. I know our after-school engagement program piece, we're really trying to grasp it and get a hold of who is staying after school, who is taking part in it. We're looking at some different strategies between AAA and myself with when we are going to survey our students. We're going to survey at the end of this year so that we can begin next school year with the clubs and the activities and the engagement opportunities that the students want to have after school. But as far as boiling it down, we have not boiled that aspect down yet.
And this is probably way too far down into the weeds, but are these not that kind of weed?
Thanks for the clarification.
Thanks, Charles.
We're still thinking about it. We
Are these non-duplicated? So for example, could a Hispanic student also be an ELL student?
Yes.
In this?
Yes, they can.
So in some ways, it's counterintuitive that the gap decreased for Hispanic versus white, but increased almost by the same amount for ELL versus non-ELL.
Correct.
Yeah, it's important to know that our ELL population is not all
Oh, of course.
dominated by Hispanic, but it is that opposite thing that you would think they would trend together, right? Yeah.
And
Also, this thing to know is this is duplicated, so the kids can be in all three categories. The first set was, are they in something, right?
Yeah.
So that's not duplicated. Now it's those that were in something, where are they participating, and they could be in all three.
And do we have, because we're looking at comparing 18 to 19, but I can't remember how far back we go with tracking it to this level as far as, 1 year to 1 year doesn't necessarily show a
What's
trend.
the direction, but not trend? sure.
Yeah. Do we have 17? We don't.
I have not seen seven, no.
Okay. And I was just side talking, just saying that we're not comparing the exact same audience with the exact same audience. I mean, you could have had an influx of
Yeah.
Correct.
a particular type of student that comes into the middle school that's seeing an uptake, the graduating class exiting, so we're not exactly, I wouldn't say we're trending quite yet. This is just 2 data points.
Right. Got it. Gives you direction, but it doesn't give you trend, and it's always going to be a cohort that shifts unless you shrink the cohort to monitor grade level by grade level as a 9th grader, as a 10th grader, as an 11th grader. So there's different ways that you can kind of look at this data. We've said middle school and high school participation rates because we believe most 6th graders are like most 6th graders, and most 7th graders are like 7th graders. So over time, that should give us a picture of what's going on and where gaps exist and where we should modify programming or strategy. So.
We're actually going to allude to that point in 2 slides.
Okay.
A little bit
Okay.
about the 2 years of data, looking through also. If we look at some generalized data observations for participation grades 6 through 12, overall, our students increased in athletics by 2%, 1% in co-curricular, while participation stayed consistent with after-school programming. So when you look district-wide, that is a really good statistic to highlight. Reduction in participation was experienced by free lunch students by 1% in co-curricular and athletics. Black student population or participation increased in after-school programming by 3% and athletics by 1%. Hispanic participation increased in 2 subcategories, 2% in co-curricular and 1% in athletics. And black students again participated in our highest level in athletics across the board, and that was at 38%. Yes, ma'am.
So, quick question. So I know of some teachers in some buildings, and they are working really hard to generate interest in some additional after-school activities. So, which might affect the number of students that want to participate. So we could see some changes in the future that reflect, and it just could be simply because we're doing a better job of trying to put in place some after-school activities that are specific to certain student populations.
Yes, we have a lot of buckets for kids to choose from.
Yes, we do.
And which is a good thing, but that every time someone chooses a different place, so it's trying to capture one of the other, I guess, next steps that didn't make it in the end of the presentation, but Dr. Pilley and I are going to meet with AAA and try and really boil down the 3 buckets, make sure everything inside of there is counting appropriately to try and get our data as efficient as we can get it, or to tell the best story. Here, this is students participating in activities 18 and 19. This is grades 6 through 8, so widely considered our middle school. When you look at this graph, this graph kind of makes you wince a little bit, pulls you back a little, but I think there's 2 things we need to think of. Number one, this is where we alluded to, we only have 2 years of data that we are comparing. You look at our percentage changes, 2018, we had a huge influx the year before I joined the district, and that's with our expansion in Misha, adding cross-country, archery exploding. So this right here, when you look at the fact that we went from 300 archery students to last year we shot over 970, to where we've exceeded any gym that we have, and all of that happened in 2018. So when you look at that explosion, your second year is not going to be as great statistically. It doesn't mean we're not doing good things. It just means we're following up a marquee year, a banner year, a great year. So we believe this is the start of our stabilization of our numbers here. So the hope would be that the fiscal year 20 would mirror 19, and so we can stabilize in there, and we're showing that, and then start to try and gain percentages from there on.
One of the other little nuances, right, as we look at this is middle school is calculated 6 through 8.
Correct.
And most of our athletic programming is 7-8, right, because you can't start in 6-8, so it does create some little bit of misleading data regarding the participation rates, because really the programming's not available at 6th grade level, so we either have to expand programming at 6th grade level, because we looked at just 7th and 8th grade percentage level, it'd be much higher. So it's another nuance of a 6-8 that doesn't necessarily capture all the programming that we have. We're 9-12, it's almost everything's available to everybody the whole time. So
I think if we move archery to co-curricular or to after-school programming, we can clean up the athletics part next year, and it will tell a little different story. Looking at did I move it through? No. Looking through gap closures for 6th through 8th grade. One thing, trying to really get a little bit into the weeds here, kind of an exciting aspect, look at the success, and I believe that middle category, after-school programming, that success, the 10, the 9, the 4% gap closures, I believe that is directly attributed to the engagement clubs that were put into place. I mean, that is as good as stats as I believe you can see reducing that down. See, 45, just some general observations, 45% of our middle school students are participating in co-curricular activities, which is very high. In athletics, black students once again led participation among all subcategories with 37%. I think it's interesting, 37% at the middle school, 38% at the high school. That number's really stayed steady. Compared to white students, 33, and Hispanic students at 25. Black students realized the greatest gain percentage or participation of all subgroups in after-school programming with a 5% increase, and free students experienced a 5% reduction in participation in co-curricular subcategory. Now this slide, always put the one that looks a little worse ahead of your better one. This slide looks great. We increased, this is 18 to 19 activity, and this is our high school, 9 through 12. We decreased in 2 subcategories, but we increased in 19 on this slide, which is really, really neat to see. And here's where we go into the weeds. If you look at that top line with our gap closures, our gaps got further away. And so how can we have a slide where it looks like negative information followed by positive? If you go back, we improved everywhere. So the way to close a gap is to improve at the percentage that is lower behind, but when you improve everywhere, that gap has the potential to grow, and that's what happened here with our free versus full student participation. So trying to get into the weeds a little bit, this is where we had a really positive statistics and positive output, but because everybody grew, our gaps unintendedly grew also, causing that to kind of not necessarily tell as good of a story as the successes that we experienced at the high school level. Our students grade 9 through 12 increased participation in all 3 subcategories, 4% in co-curricular and athletics, 3% in after-school programming. Free lunch students increased by 1% across all categories. Black student participation in grades 9 through 12 increased in all 3 categories, 4% in co-curricular and athletics and 3% in after-school programming. And Hispanic students experienced increased participation in 2 subcategories, 6% in co-curricular and 4% in athletics. This is our attendance, kind of testing the theory of being involved in athletics or activities, after-school programming. You're going to have better attendance. If you look through here, the column on your left, participation, this is participating in any of those 3 subcategories versus not participating. And when you look at that column on the left, the 5, 5, 4, 4, what that's doing is that's telling you what percentage greater did they participate at. The percentage to the right, where if you look at white students, -2% in all grades 6 through 12, that -2% is highlighting, whereas last year white students would have increased at 6% greater than non-participating white students. This year it was 4%. So we saw a -2 decrease. That's what that's saying. So what I want to highlight on this slide is if you look at participation versus not participating in each category, it clearly shows that if you're participating in athletics or activities or after-school programming, you are going to be at school more often than students not engaged in something. Okay? Our red columns on here, or red highlights here, I mean, we didn't necessarily do as well as we did in 18, but across the board, we did come to school more often if you were engaged in something extracurricular. So students participating in extracurricular activities attended school at higher rates than non-participating students in all subcategories. Students in extracurricular activities attended school at higher rates than non-participating students at the middle school level by 4% and the high school level by 7%. And the greatest gains in student attendance and participating in extracurricular activities were white students at the middle school, +1, and black students at the middle school, +1. So as far as next steps, we know we have work to do. We're doing it every day. We're communicating and talking and trying to figure out how to offer more relevant and engaging opportunities for our students. But we'll continue to work to highlight and support under-resourced and underrepresented students through recruitment efforts. We will continue to gauge interest with engagement clubs and create clubs pursuant to those interests. We will study co-curricular activities to identify barriers in participation and make recommendations to remove them. And one of the things that we are really proud of is our Pipkin and Westport Bulldog football team had their first ever win in the history of the program last Thursday night.
Hey.
So we are playing full 7th grade games, full 8th grade games. Everyone's playing, having a great time, and we're really excited about that. So that was a really positive change that week. And I would, again, just like to say thank you for letting me speak, and then I have the honor of introducing Dr. Lemon.
Thank you.
Everyone's good? Okay.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Ask as we go, however you want to do it. Whatever you want to do.
We were just asking
You can
about
call.
process, so.
You can go ahead now if you have anything for Josh before he steps away, or if you.
Is there anything for Josh? Anyone?
Since he's still there, I presume you'll also be following up on discipline data? Because we have attendance, we've got some preliminary indicators there, but discipline's probably a little bit tougher to sort of measure in the right kind of way. So.
Absolutely.
Our plan is to measure it by the loss of instruction. We have the 3 different metrics, and the loss of instruction is the most impactful on attendance, and it's most impactful, we believe, on your ability to learn, right? Because you're missing your classroom and your teacher on a regular basis. So that's the one that will kind of run it the same way. We haven't done that yet, so it's coming your way. We'll follow it up. So.
I would just say it's nice to have you at the podium. It's also, I know that the extent to provide, first of all, the board asked to see these type of segmented subgroups and pay attention to this. So this is exactly what we've asked for, so thank you. And then I also know the AAA and your team working to get it to this level of presentation for tonight takes a lot of work.
Well, AAA it deserves all the credit. We just went next
You did
door.
nothing.
They were.
No, I'm just
I didn't.
kidding.
I did nothing. No, they did. They did all of the work. So.
Well,
they
this
really
takes
are.
a lot of work to get it to this perspective. And while I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer at all, I really look forward to having a third year of data to look at trends and making more conclusions at that time. So, thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
How can more data ever be a down?
Well, the data are very exciting.
Thank you, John.
Allison and I are going to back and forth awkwardly do this and try to make it not very awkward. So,
Thanks for the warning.
yes, bear with us. We
Yes.
joked that maybe we should get one of those really giant T-shirts and both be in it.
Yeah,
We
no,
decided to
no,
just do it.
I would not
We
recommend.
decided to
Allison didn't agree with that one.
No. It's okay. She was. Okay. So we'll go back and forth here together. So I will start with strategy 1.2.7, which is the modern tools and resources. We are, if you can believe it, in year 5 of Ignite. So still continuing the work of providing tools to our students. So this year we handed out another 25,000 Chromebooks to students. We have about 4,000 iPads out in our system as well. It's also our second year of refresh of Chromebooks. So students love when they get brand new ones. So we love giving those to them. I also had the privilege this year of handing my own third grader her device. So it was a special time for us, and we're continuing that work, as well as the work of the 800 hotspots. So we still provide internet access to our students. You've noticed, if you've been paying attention, this number continues to decrease year over year. So we monitor that closely. We want to make sure we're using our district resources effectively there. And we are finding more families have internet access as time goes on. More apartment complexes now offer that as standard packages, and that's great that our community is stepping up in those neighborhoods that need it most. So that continues to go down for us, but we still are providing that. And the blended learning specialist continued their important work last year of providing over 4,800 hours of coaching around technology integration. Those roles have shifted, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a little bit. So I'm going to now hand it over to Allison. She's going to tell you what we're doing with all those devices.
So just a high-level overview, because we do present to you all on the curriculum adoption cycles, but as far as educational resources, last year we implemented new resources for 612 Science, 912 Business Ed, and K-12 PE and Health. We also implemented new curriculum for freshman seminar at Hillcrest and at Glendale. During that year, we also worked on and then presented to you all in February new curriculum and adopted new resources for K-5 ELA and 612 math. We also wrote new curriculum for the Level 1 Academy pathway courses at Glendale and at Hillcrest, because those sophomores are now in that Level 1 class. And then some other items that we added last year as far as educational resources. We rolled out a series of assessments that were aligned to Missouri Learning Standards so that students were able to practice those assessment items, the technology enhanced assessment items, items that are aligned to our standards and the depth of knowledge that they would see on a MAP or EOC. And so we rolled that out last year because we finally had data back from the state on what we were deficient in, what we needed to practice on a little bit more, and some released items that we could work with. So we rolled that out last year, and those were heavily utilized by our staff members. We also developed Canvas courses at the beginning of the year last year for nearly all of our content areas, and these were developed as blueprint courses. So these standards aligned courses, a curriculum that we already had in existence, were created in Canvas. They are able to be pushed out to teachers so that the teachers can still edit those courses. They still have control over the content, but it's all right there and ready for them. Because they were a blueprint course, we can also update that if we missed the mark a little bit and we needed to make a change, or we needed to add an assessment. We can sync it, and sometimes it takes a minute or night to do that, but we can push that update out to teachers very quickly. We developed intervention resources. Last year was the first year that we looked at screening our students for possible risk factors of dyslexia, and we rolled out intervention resources to our teachers to provide support for them with that. And I would say I try to count up what we have out there right now, but across our district K-12, we have over 20 digital curriculum platforms. We have 8 adaptive software or intervention programs. Now, that doesn't mean that a single student is using 8 different programs or 20 different programs. This is across K-12. And then we have a variety of different research programs that we have, that our students have access to, and it depends on the grade level again.
Allison, can I ask, how many students, do you know, you may not have sort of actual utilization of all of the digital assessments and that kind of thing. Do we know how many students did that?
I don't have hard numbers on that. I do not have hard numbers on that, and it's really difficult to gauge. There are some ways that we're trying to improve having those insights. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, sure.
But I know anecdotally, teachers were very grateful to have that opportunity for their students.
One of the nice things of Canvas now is they've enhanced the product so it matches state assessments. So when we're building those practice assessments, they have the tools that they will see on the map or the EOC. So they're getting to practice navigating those earlier. So it's a great collaboration. So this update will just be on Springfield Public Schools' use of Launch. We know it's a statewide program, but this is how Springfield Public Schools used Launch last year. When we see these numbers now, obviously we're in the middle of exponential growth. So this is how we ended the year last year. So 12,437 enrollments. You frequently ask me how many students that equates to. So that equates to about 7,000 students in our system who took some kind of online programming last year. That number of graduates is also a number we continue to watch. So how many of our graduates last year took an online class before they graduated from Springfield Public Schools? The year prior, that number was 54%. Last year, we jumped to almost 66% of our graduates have taken an online class.
They took it during their senior year, is what you're saying?
No, between their freshman year and their senior year.
Sometime during the 4 years,
That's correct.
they took a class. Okay.
That's right.
That's all I need.
That's correct. Yes. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Of the 2019 graduates.
That's correct. And again, up from 54% of the graduates from the previous year. So we had over 3,361 credits earned towards graduation and another 715 credits earned in our credit recovery platform. So as a reminder, we've designed our own alternative ed platforms, including our Missouri Option and HiSET Prep class, which we saw great success with last year, and our students are taking advantage of that. We continue to be most proud of the quality of our courses. You're the first to hear this publicly, so I've been allowed to announce it at our board table in October, and it's officially October 1st, so we can. Springfield Public Schools and Launch was given the National Quality Matters Award. Will be recognized at their international conference in October with the Making a Difference K-12 award. The previous recipient was Florida Virtual. So if you think about the caliber of programming that we're now being placed in, it's a huge honor for the team that does this work.
That's awesome.
We're very excited.
Where is that?
Thank you. So it is, and the award ceremony will be in Grapevine, Texas, which is outside in that.
That's awesome.
The
International
Truman
Conference
Show
in
in
Grapevine,
Grapevine, Texas. That's right. In that
I was
little
thinking you're
giant
going to
building.
say some place you.
No, I'm going to Grapevine, Texas to pick that up for us.
So
I was
exotic.
going to ask you.
Yes.
That's right. You can come on if you want to
Right
join
next to
me.
the airport.
That is amazing.
It's great to think of the work that we've done in 2 years to be recognized like that. It's really
That's the
incredible.
thing, in
Yeah.
such a short time frame. Wow, really impressive.
Thank you. So at the end of last year, we had 188 districts. Again, I chuckled when I typed that on the screen because we are today at 227 partners.
I just
That was
signed
our
one.
number as of, you just signed another one? So that was our number as of June 30th. So we continue to grow and expand. And to give you just where we are today, when we walked into the meeting, our enrollment's at 18,675 seats just for fall. And that is statewide numbers. So we'll bring a comprehensive launch update in the spring that will talk about all the factors, demographic data, grade breakdowns, and how our students are performing.
Oh, will that demographic data sort of break it down into the same subgroups as the other
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
that'll be
correct.
really interesting.
Yeah. So we're bringing that as a fuller report to you this spring. So before I move off and let Allison wrap up, the blended learning specialists have officially moved under Dr. Holt's department. So the work of Ignite has transitioned to being part of the learning development department. So where it used to be a pull-out standalone work, we are proud that we've transitioned that to just the way we do business. So it's blending the step-up coaches that previously existed with the blended learning specialists. So there's now more job-embedded coaches district-wide. So that work began really last spring and continues now. We continue to have more interventions. So this board approved more launch staffing in the spring for our internal launch students. So we have a full-time counselor. We have 4 full-time teachers, including a graduation mentor who's just working with our online-only seniors. And again, we're seeing great results with that individual. We're closely monitoring our pass rates in our courses and ensuring that our launch professional development focus this year is on those individuals. Just so you know, I have right now about 154 adjunct teachers who are working for us. About 50% of those are outside of Springfield Public Schools to meet demand. So we have a focus on how our students are performing. We continue to build more classes. Our focus remains on advanced placement courses. That continues to be an area that districts are having problems filling teachers. This fall, I also have almost 1,400 seats just in foreign language alone. So the gap of foreign language instruction continues across the state. So we are proud to be a provider of foreign language actual teachers, not just software. So that's a growing area for us. And middle school electives continue to be built out as well. And again, I mentioned 227 partners, so it adds up daily. So.
That's right.
Anything else for me before I turn it over to Allison?
Anything for Nicole? Thank you.
Welcome.
Just a few points to wrap up on the educational resources side. So this year we are implementing our K-5 ELA, 612 math, and those Academy Pathway courses, level 1 courses. So this is being supported with ongoing professional learning opportunities that I think we'll hit on more in another focus area. But our coordinators are working hard to support these teachers. We're partnering with learning specialists and learning coaches to also provide that job-embedded support. We are working on reviewing resources that we will bring to you in February for K-5 math, world language, and vocal music. And pending approval, we will start on the development of that curriculum as well. Just keep that cycle going. A work team has been created. I don't necessarily own this up here, but just wanted to make sure that you are aware that a work team has been created to study our math scores and what we need to be doing around that. And that's been a great dialogue so far and a great partnership. And then also we have started our first FFA chapter at Hillcrest this year, and we have 15 students in that chapter.
Awesome.
We have a teacher that is getting she has a provisional certificate in ag, and that is associated with one of our pathway classes at Hillcrest. So very exciting, a really big need that we heard in the community, so we're pretty pumped about that.
You have, did you say 15 students?
15 students.
That should rapidly increase.
It daily. She's getting questions from homeschool students and students from other buildings. Can I drive to Hillcrest and be a part of that? So we're navigating that as well.
And how are you doing with partners for that?
For FFA,
Yeah, I mean, do you have some community partners that are stepping up and wanting to help with that?
like wanting to bang down the door. Yes, they are lining up, and
Yeah.
lots of opportunities for partnerships. She actually I was out there on Friday, and she told us that she just secured a sponsor for their jackets that they wear to the competitions
Oh.
and things. So yeah.
Terrific.
There's lots of folks that want
Yes.
to help with that.
When did
Good.
FFA go out of style and now it's back in style? I mean, my context strength is just begging that question.
In Springfield?
Yeah, in Springfield. Does anybody know
There was one in the
I've
70s.
never known us to have, I don't know when Bruce, you're our.
I think it predates Before Bruce.
It was one in the
Predates
70s.
Bruce, there we
The
go.
record shows it predates
Are you?
That's a long
Really?
time.
It's been that long?
That's like-
That just really,
If ever.
I'm from the South, and every
Yeah.
high school had an FFA
we-
program, so I'm surprised that the Midwest
Well,
and they were blue and gold, I remember
They're everywhere
exactly.
around us. We
Blue
just haven't
corduroy
had it.
jackets.
our surrounding districts all have a chapter, and so,
Strong chapter.
yes, and so it's time, and
pastime, apparently.
People are very excited. Desi's very excited. I mean, he's been down working, the Desi support person's been down working with our teacher, and it's been great.
Any other questions for Allison? Thank you, Allison.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of, to talk about early childhood, and Missy is filling her own personal bucket in a foreign land, so I feel bad for her. But I'm going to give you an update on our early childhood programming. And with our goal, our strategy of 1.2.8, we want to increase early learning activities. We want to increase the number of classrooms and seats that we have for our early learners, as well as increase the kindergarten readiness. So as we look about that, we have a couple of things for you to peruse, and that is the community events that are part of our early childhood programming. And so you go across the top, it gives you the idea of those types of activities, and I have working definitions of all of those types of activities if you are interested what falls under those. Give you a minute to look at that. Notice there is an asterisk in 701 that might indicate a drop of activities, but what that actually recognizes is a change in practice, where we used to offer all those opportunities, and if no one showed, we still counted it as offering those opportunities, but now it reflects if there was a no-show, then we go with the numbers that actually were represented.
So the numbers are large in others. What's others?
Others, so that's a great question. So others includes all other activities that are not there, and examples of those would be, reflects our Greene County Jail visits. And so in that, and that we have a slide or a highlight of that coming up on earlier. It also includes any other activities that parents and teachers may be involved in at a school setting that includes the regular K-12 and families as well. A PAT person is there to engage in activities. Yoga, there's actually a breakdown of 3 different kinds of yogas. We have toddler yoga, so teaching Warrior 1 pretty early in their lives. Music involved, so those types.
They're going to need it,
so.
yeah.
Goat. Goat maybe.
Goat yoga. So you can see, this will give you an opportunity, looking at the last 4 years of information, how we have increased our learning classrooms, both the number of classrooms that we have, specifically in our Wonder Years, is where we've had the most growth, but we've also increased our XE programming. And what's exciting is you see the total classroom served from all of those programs has gone from 40 in the beginning of 2015 to landing at 54, and we are up to 969 of students served. So it's just not increasing classrooms, but increasing students and seats, and that's very exciting. So we do work to make sure that we want to talk to our kindergarten teachers and say, hey, how are our kids coming to kindergarten, prepared or not prepared? And so this reflects that data, and you can see that it happened every 4 years, at least from this data in front of you, and then for the last, we've done it every 2 years since 2014, 16, and 18 to give us more regular data. And we can see that if you combine the prepared and well-prepared, in 2016, that was 73.2 combined percent, and in 2018, that was 73.3%. So a majority of our kindergarten teachers feel that the students are coming well prepared, and so it's just how do we help those that are not prepared move along further and get on grade level. So some highlights that we, as we look at the data that we want to share with you. So opening Campbell, last year, an additional 200 seats. We went from 431 to 631 in our Wonder Years classrooms. The first ever early childhood snapshot to give them some information on attendance, behavior, pre-academic skills of all Wonder Years students is our first opportunity there. And then this goes kind of to the other that you brought up. What does other? Parents as Teachers does the Strengthening Family programs in the Greene County Jail, and they do 4 classes weekly. And as we have certainly more males and fathers incarcerated, up to 36 men and 1 women's class of 12 female inmates are held each week, and helping them make sure that, hey, you can still make a difference in your child's lives, and you can still positively influence them even from the inside. And so what you do matters is very important curriculum for them gives them opportunity to connect, especially when they are able to leave that facility. Our next steps include adding 175 seats for the wonder years in 1920, and we will continually add private child care providers to our list of screenings. And so screenings is a big part of what we do, because we know and we hope that eventually they'll join our system, and that's the work that makes sure that we can do that. Our PAT program has added mass screening day in August, and then we have 2 more in the spring of 2020. And this is huge because we want to get them as early as possible and make sure that we know who they are and can identify them. We talked earlier about the naming of the Southwest Early Childhood Center. Construction is underway for that. We have 12 pre-K classrooms that will be housed in that facility. And then designing the early childhood hubs of Boyd and Williams. And Boyd has been exciting to be a part of, and we're getting ready for that work on Williams to make sure that we are driving that early childhood to the neighborhoods where those kids live. And then we plan to add an additional 200 seats in 2020, 2021. What questions do you have?
Questions for Jay?
I just think, not that you're not doing a great job, Jay, but I think if Missy were here, and I'm asking you to confirm this, though some of the events went down, the number of events went down, say from last year to this year, I feel like I recall her talking about that they were trying to not do so many and focus more intense efforts on certain types of events. And they had so even though we are looking at number of events, we could perhaps look at number of participation, and that would be reflective of different numbers.
Yeah.
So I don't want anybody to look at that and think they're not doing as many events.
Sure.
Addition by subtraction.
Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely, and in my discussion with her, it became a quality versus quantity.
Correct.
And I think that's what we're focusing more is on the quality programming that's really going to connect and pull on the parents' heartstrings to be involved and engaged in their students' early childhood years.
Correct, okay, I just didn't want anybody to look at that and
Absolutely.
think differently. And then also, it'll be really exciting and interesting to see how our new classroom seats at the new centers will impact readiness.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, that's gonna be, and again, it doesn't take 1 year or 2 year of data, we've gotta have more than 2 years, but still, I'm excited to see that come into the
Yeah,
fold.
absolutely. As we discussed here, these are just comparisons, but we hope that this turns into the right trend factors.
That's right.
Yeah, and as we know, that 2018 data point on that doesn't include the first expansion of.
Right, correct.
Because that was last year, so those kids are kindergartners this year, so we won't know that until next year when we take the survey again. And so a little of that data will lag. But,
It's the personal stories behind all of these that we hope to bring to this besides the data digs at some point. That's the
Absolutely.
meaningful heartstring
Absolutely.
connections.
Anything else? Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
You bet. Next up is Dr. Akin with diverse and underrepresented students.
Welcome, Ben. Good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody hanging in there still?
We are.
All right, great. So it's my pleasure to introduce strategy 1.2.9, and that is to ensure that outcomes for students with diverse and underrepresented backgrounds are improving as they access supports based on their needs and their abilities. In this strategy, we focus on 5 areas: academic support structures, student empowerment groups, ELL and migrant education program, professional learning structures, and advanced coursework. With academic support, what we're really talking about are interventions there that are deployed for underrepresented, under-resourced students, which will help us to address those performance gaps that we've been talking about. The primary support structures that we're going to highlight in this update are Club Encore, which was our former ELP program, and Explore, obviously our summer learning program. So the chart that you see here are students participating in Club Encore. And again, this is a comparison from 2018 to 2019. And I'll just go over a couple of the highlights for you here. First of all, what we want to draw your attention to is that we did see the largest drop in grades 4 and 5 at about 5 points each. But if you look at our free students and those that are under-resourced and underrepresented, we see some bright spots. We saw a little bit of a dip in second grade with our free students, but we saw increases both in third and fourth grade, and then another dip in fifth grade. Our black students, we saw increases both at the second and third grade levels, but again, we saw just a small decrease in fourth grade and fifth grade. Hispanic students stayed consistent at second grade. We saw increases at third, and again, a dip in fourth and an increase in fifth grade. And then with our ELL students, we saw increases both at the second and third grade level, a slight decrease at the fourth grade level, and again, we saw a 4-point increase at fifth grade level. Those are the data observations that I just reviewed with you on the chart. And so next, we have students participating in Explore. Again, these are comparisons from 2018 to 2019. What you'll see is that we saw an increase across the board as far as participation goes, 1% at the elementary level, but then we saw a 7% gain at the secondary level. We probably would attribute that to some of the things we've been doing on the virtual learning side, some increased offerings there that probably helped drive that just a little bit. If you look at our free students, we were consistent at the elementary level, but again, we saw a nice increase at the secondary level, and we're happy with that change. If you look at our black and our Hispanic students, just very consistent across the board with our participation rates with those groups. Our ELL students, again, pretty consistent, just a slight decrease there at the secondary level as far as participation rates go with Explore. Questions about Club Encore and Explore participation rates?
Is the relative impact, academic impact, is that part of the next?
That's correct. We're really talking about engagement participation rates, and we'll really dig into some of those outcomes that you would have seen last year in our next report. Okay. Thank you, and I will bring up LA.
Thank you.
It's hard to make sense of that.
Welcome, LA.
There's no.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here because most of you know this is not the most exciting part of my day.
Thanks.
No, it has nothing to do with you guys at all.
Okay, that heckling starts now.
I know, we were talking about that heckling piece, right? I know.
Keep
No.
digging, LA.
No,
I know, right?
I'd stop
Okay,
there.
so I'm going to share some information with you about the student empowerment groups. Leave me alone, Gary, so I can move on or forget what I'm going to tell you. Sorry. So this is some information about our student empowerment groups, and most of these students are primarily in middle school. And in 2016, we originally started a pilot program of trying to give students an opportunity of to where they felt valued and they could see themselves in their schools, and that they felt like that they actually had some control over how their lives were going. And this was our, what we call, was our backpack group, which were our Latinx kiddos, which pretty much in DESE would be our Hispanic students, but we're evolving that name a little bit. So in 2017, we added African American males and African American females, which we call our Young Ladies of Purpose group. And we were able to increase that in the number of students, but also in the number of sites. And then we had a great, I guess we had a lot of great feedback from various sites to where they wanted our department working with their students. And we had a big boom last year where we had over 400 students participating in those programs. And so we've just been lucky enough to where we had, gosh, over 230 more students participating over 1 year. I think the sites feel that the students value that opportunity to feel that they're seen and that they're appreciated. So they might like the snacks as well. Yes.
So I have a question that came up in in a different committee that I serve on, so I want to ask it now since you're in front of us.
Sure.
How are students selected or invited or encouraged, or whatever you want to call it, to be a part of student empowerment group?
It varies from site to site.
Okay.
Typically, they work with our office in determining what that looks like.
Each site?
Each site, yes. And so we worked with typically the counselors, the CSI, the principal, in determining what they want their group to look like, or what the expectation might be. For some sites, it might be for kiddos who are maybe more highly at risk. At another site, they may look at it as a leadership opportunity. or an opportunity just to have other students be engaged in something. So it varies from site to site on what that looks like, and we try to support that within our realm of the work that we do as far as equity and access. So if that.
So the first group you said was a backpack, was?
Yes,
So
uh-huh.
would that be underrepresented?
Yes, that was our Latinx group.
Okay.
That we originally had.
Not the backpack.
The backpack group, yes. The backpack group was the first pilot group that were our Latinx kiddos, so they are
Okay,
a part.
But not to be confused with our backpack program.
Yes, those are very, very
Okay.
different, correct, yeah.
But that's a language.
Yes,
Okay.
you're correct. Yeah, it's totally different piece. It was a presenter who used to present at the Steps to Empowerment at Missouri State, where a presenter he wrote a book about the things you need in your backpack in order to be successful in school and in life. So we let us piggyback off of that and use
That
that.
sheds some light on that.
Yeah.
So it varies at each site, and that may be something that the principal or the counselor or
Yes.
the equity champion.
It could be with the equity
may get
champion
together and
as well.
decide.
And we usually work in
the needs of their
conjunction with them,
building.
because we feel that it's not hitting our priority population as where there may be opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
We'll kind of try to direct them in that right path as far as what our focus needs to be.
So it sounds like a needs assessment, which, because every building's different,
Exactly, yeah,
would be the way to go.
very true,
Okay.
yes.
Go ahead, Charles, sorry.
Ali, the thing that jumps out at me is the average number of students per school. I mean, in that first year that you have listed,
Mhm.
that's what, roughly 14, just under 14 kids?
Right.
Per site, and it's roughly 50, 57, 58 per site in 2018-19. Are
Right.
those spread evenly among those seven
No,
schools? Or?
what we started have happening last year is that you started seeing additional groups pop up at the same site, but they were various groups. So you would go to a site like Hickory, for example, they would have a backpack group of 50 kiddos because they're an ELL site. And then you would have their the African-American male and female groups. And then they would also have a GSA group as well on top of that. So they would be included in that as well.
So I think what you see is, a little bit to your point, Charles, is once a school starts something, then other groups say, I want that too.
Yes.
Or the faculty and the staff or the counselors say, that's worked really well for
This
this
is making
group,
a
let's
difference.
expand it to another group. So the work is going from 7 schools to a larger number of schools, because once schools come on and programming starts to happen, the numbers increase rapidly, as you see. So the count per school is certainly going up.
Sure.
And can you remind us, the student empowerment groups count in the co-curricular count that we saw earlier? Is that true?
It's in the after school, but.
No, I wouldn't think so, because we actually do some of these during the day, yeah.
So this is completely separate than the numbers
Yes.
we saw earlier?
Yeah, so even though it's other opportunities for that, because the program we're looking at history, cultural, but also a life skill as we kind of go through the program. And then we also have people who are reflective of their groups coming in to speak.
So you're saying because it doesn't happen after school, it can't count for that? Because it sometimes happens during school? That's the
That's been our guideline.
differentiation?
We haven't classified this because it's activities that happen during the day. A lot of the programming
Because
happens.
what's interesting about that is how we're pulling out subgroups, and we're looking for engagement, and this is engagement, and I'm not Desi, but I don't care when it happens.
Right.
Right.
It would be really interesting if people are a part of this program and how that would impact the data. Is everybody tracking me?
Yeah.
That's where you kind of see our final data points that we'll wrap up with tonight are around engagement, so student feedback around engagement, because to your point, I don't care if the engagement goes up during the school day, the school
Correct.
day.
Right.
We just want the engagement to go up.
Correct.
And we'll use every strategy
Right,
we
yes,
can.
okay.
So, yeah.
And then, can you just give me an example or two, LA, of the young ladies of purpose or the young men of purpose, what schools that's happening in?
Most of the schools are Hillcrest, Pipkin, Westport, Jarrett, Carver,
Hickory Hills.
Hickory Hills. I thought I said Hickory Hills, sorry. But we also have a couple of elementaries where we're doing 5th grade empowerment groups as well, like at Bowerman, Williams, Portland, and McGregor. So I think the sites are starting to grow
No,
as well.
I think it's excellent. And I just left a Leadership Springfield retreat panel where business leaders were talking about wanting to engage with, and, you know, it was talking about tea and turning and recruiting different types of people and starting at an early age and that type of thing. So I just see that being
And that's a huge part of the
Yeah.
program, is that we bring in folks who are reflective of those students to where, as far as the professions that they do. Because my thing, honestly, for me, I don't really care what they do. I want them to see what success is very different.
Sure.
And I want them to understand that there are people who may look like them, who are doing awesome, incredible things in their career and in the community.
Yeah.
And
Well, I get
so
to
there is no one way
I
of
get to
doing
see it
that.
on your
Right.
social media, so it's awesome, but I just wasn't sure exactly what schools that was happening
Yeah.
in, so.
Yeah,
thank
those were the ones that were happening last year, and then I assume that that's going to continue to grow this year as well. So it becomes a logistical piece.
Yes.
But looking at a little bit more of that, we're able to bring in, as far as having community support, to where those students are able to participate and have experiences that they typically probably would not had without the community chiming in. So some of those example are kiddos were able to go to the symphony, some were able to go to the Lion King, which was pretty awesome, and then NAACP Freedom Fund Banquet and Missouri State University, where we're able to partner with them on various experiences for our students. And then with the next piece is as far as bringing in professionals from the community who support those kiddos and share their experiences with them and what success looks like. Okay, so talking a little bit about ELL and migrant education, and looking at the Imagine Learning software that our students use. So for those beginning learners of English, this software helps them increase their proficiency and try to increase their development at a more rapid rate. And the Imagine software also helps support those kiddos when using the technology as well, because a lot of kiddos don't have that experience or just Chromebooks and iPads a lot of times. And then with the other piece, with as far as their level of comfort when it comes to using the technology, when it comes to the district assessment, they have a much greater level of confidence when they have the opportunity to use that. But with the International Institute in Southwest Missouri, is where that resettles refugees in the area. They partner, the staff partners with that group to make sure that transition for students and families are much easier transition for them. I keep missing the deal there. Okay, so looking at a little bit about professional development when it comes to the Equity Champions, we meet with them as far as having 30 hours of professional development, and each school site has a champion, and we try to give them the tools that they need to support their staff where there might be inequities, but also help make their site feel more inclusive and welcoming, and also including those families in that. So as we meet with them, we try to give our champions a greater understanding of what microaggressions and what stereotypes and bias looks like, but also talk about privilege as well as we go through, and try to give them the tools that they need to support their staff when incidents do arise. How do you handle that? Look like. Also with our champion trainers, we have various people in the community come in and speak about what they do, typically not from our regular community partners. We try to give them typically folks who they haven't heard from before, like the NAACP, from GLSEN, and from Flow Center, and from Be a Jewel, which Cheryl Clay was here earlier. Be a Jewel is an organization which helps supports grandparents who have school-age kiddos. And Yvonne and I had to deal with the incident the other day that included one. And it's just incredible to see the support that our community is able to give various ways. And then looking at advanced coursework, and Dr. Dublin asked me to talk about a couple of these programs because they also kind of fit underneath that equity umbrella as well. So looking at AVID, and AVID is one of those programs where Carver Middle School with 8th graders and Parkview 9th graders will to engage at looking at that first generation piece of those for those students and try to help them get on a pathway of college and career success, and try to identify what the resources are and the supports that they need in order for those higher level courses and to be able to thrive when they have those. And then looking at Troll, Hillcrest, and Parkview, partner with Equal Opportunity Schools, and that is specifically looking at helping close rates and income enrollment gaps as far as students not taking AP and IB programs, as far as being a part of those courses. And so they will come in and help the staff and come up with strategy that help support and advocate for those students to where ultimately those diverse students are going to want to take AP and IB courses. Then the last bullet point there is each high school has advanced course access champion, and I have to try to remember that. And they'll work in conjunction with the Equal Opportunity School folks as far as in diverse students and also recruiting diverse students to take AB and IB and dual credit courses. And then next steps, the ELL department was able to have 3 new ELL specialists this year to allow access for direct supports for middle school schools. And the Equity Diversity Advisory Group, which Jill Patterson and Wes Pratt are the co-chairs of, and try to recommend, as far as we have a diverse community group participating, we meet twice a month, and their charge is to recommend to the district how to make more inclusive and welcoming, and as we continue to go through, various staff folks support them as they go through that endeavor, and Denise and Charles also participate in that as well. And then the next piece is looking at the equity trainings for all staff members, which I was in charge of putting together and having a cohort of about 22 folks helping to deliver a 2-hour training for all of our staff, which has been a monumental task, but it's been awesome and been incredible to offer that. But most of the focus has been around understanding stereotypes, identity, how your identity may also affect the way you may educate, but also looking at when a bias incident occurs, how do you respond? Because that was a lot of the feedback that we got back from community members, that they're asking us to respond when incidents occur. So most of that training is finishing up. All school sites have been trained. There are a few more departments that are left through the process. And we'll do makeups early second quarter and get those folks taken care of. And then the last piece there is that all members of senior leadership will be participating in facing racism with equity champions as well, with a 1-day training provided by Missouri State University, going on in September and October. And I believe there's one session in November as well. So a lot of professional development on equity, race, and marginalization. So any questions for me before I step away?
So you've been busy?
A little, a tad. But it's been pretty awesome. I've gotten incredible feedback from people in the community and our staff in various ways on how much they've appreciated the engagement and the discussion level of what we've delivered to them.
Just
Sure.
On the second bullet, or the third bullet point, all student and non-student sites will participate in equity training. Is that called something? For instance, the one that we're joining senior leadership is called Facing Racism,
Right.
and it has a set curriculum.
Mhm.
Is the equity training, is there a brand or?
I wasn't created to come up with anything other than equity training.
Okay.
It's
I
just,
didn't
we could
know
call
if
it
was-
Equity Training 101 if we like.
Okay.
But pretty
It's
much.
not patterned after any, particular, I guess, curriculum that's already established out there.
No, other than there's some pieces of trainings that we've done in the district before, and things that we've learned as we've gone throughout as far as best practices and things to offer to a staff.
Okay.
Mhm.
And just as a board member, it just helps us to see that, this group is getting this training, XYZ, and this
Right.
group is getting this training, and to
Yes.
make sure that.
There's continuity.
Correct, yeah, so.
Yes.
And all 7 of us will be in the Facing Racism trainings.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're all signed up.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie.
So we'll tell you that we are in the final segment of our presentation, so some hope to see the light at the end of this tunnel. And that final segment is student perceptions about school engagement, which are those are priority metrics, and we'll look at a gap closure analysis therein. So to kind of frame this, there are really 3 data sets that we'll be looking at: student on school and teacher relationships, student feedback on classroom engagement, student feedback on school engagement. So if you remember from seeing this in the past, so for instance, school and teacher relationships, those really are generated from 4 or 5 questions on the Panorama Student Survey. They roll up into a percentage on perception about school and teacher relationships. So percent favorable about teacher respect, teacher concern, teacher compassion, and student excitement to recommend teacher next year. So that's what these percentages are generated from. I'm going to take the data set and then turn it over to Jay kind of to take us home. And this first one is about school and teacher relationships. Similar pattern here, just to show some of the increases and then also opportunities. Overall, you can see that SPS improved by 1%, again related to hires from 2018 to 2019. 59% of our kids report being favorable as far as school and teacher relationships, and that's an increase of 1% from the year prior. I'm just, yeah.
The 11,797, that's the number of responses?
Yes, that's correct.
Non-duplicated students who responded to that, okay.
Thank you.
We don't survey K2, right, so those are completely eliminated, and then there's a representative sample of 312.
I can tell you my granddaughters are very opinionated.
They maybe have an opinion.
The kindergarten grader.
We could put K2 and probably get some increased percentage.
We just have some more green, maybe, I don't know.
I assure you, they have a point of view.
I do want to point out a couple things. So if you'll notice a couple areas, Hispanic at the middle school level increased 3% 2018 to 2019. However, black population decreased by 4%. And again, red is the opportunity. That would be opportunities for improvement. Green would be positive highlights. Look at a similar gap closure analysis. Again, green being what we want, closing the gap, red being not what we want, and continued gap. So a couple areas, obviously, that we've improved the gap, and other areas that we haven't. I neglected to say, and you'll see a similar pattern to Jay, that in looking at these charts, it's pretty similar. We see about 13 green and 12 red. So just kind of to frame the 13 areas of celebration, 12 opportunities for improvement. This would be 5 and 2, and Jay will kind of continue with that pattern. Lastly, some data observation. Elementary students did have the highest favorable perceptions about school and teacher relationships at 72%, I think, to your point, Tim. High school students had the greatest increase at 2%, which is nice to see. Students on free lunch did have a decrease in favorable perception at the elementary by 2% and high school level 1. Black students did have a favorable perception at the elementary and middle school level by 4%. However, at the high school level, black students had an increase of 6%, which I think is fair to point out both of those. Largest gap closure was between Hispanic and white students at the middle school level, kind of a theme we're seeing with Hispanic students, that population. Again, that's good that we closed that gap, but we're seeing it by 3%. Okay, Jay Anderson's going to come up and share the other 2 data sets and then kind of take us home.
Thanks, Shane. So continuing on with this, so the students' positive perceptions of classroom, and this is defined as the students with favor being excited to go to school, talk about school outside of, nope, let me jump back, I'm ahead one. This is the students that are favorable about classroom, in the classroom, excitement, interest, and participation. Okay, so as we look at this information and you scan it, you're going to find that there are 10 greens and 14 reds, and so a little not quite as balanced as we want it to be, but there are some certain celebrations. You go down the elementary, you see all mostly highlighted in greens, and some opportunities is in middle school, and then a mixed bag there in high school. And if you run across going there, we want to highlight some of the information there. Train your eye to some of those actual gaps, and anything that's 1 to 2% in comparison is not a big deal, but anything that kind of pushes the 4 or 5%, like, that might be a comparison digging into. So here's some of that engagement as we look at that. Elementary students had the greatest favorable perceptions about their classroom and engagement at 64%. Free lunch students had decreases in favorable perceptions at the middle school level, down 2%, and the high school level the same. Black students increased in a favorable perception about classroom engagement level as well as the high school level. Hispanic students at the high school level had decreases of favorable perceptions at 3% below, and the greatest gap closure between students subgroups was between the black and white students at 4% decrease.
Yeah.
Yes, 4% grant.
Jay, can I ask, there were about 6,000 more responses on this one than the previous one. Why do you think students answered this one more frequently, or was?
This one actually happens on teachers, so they get to respond to feedback on specific teachers, so they get multiple response opportunities.
Okay.
So the other ones are school or.
So they could be
generic.
responding to 4 or 5 different
You got
teachers.
it. So we,
So now-
That makes
so they get more opportunities to give feedback on a specials teacher, and teachers get their own data set back from their own students. Something that would happen at higher ed level where you get individual feedback often or 2 teachers.
Yeah.
Yes, they get that feedback and then we accumulate it at the building and district level.
But they're not unduplicated students in this instance.
You got
Okay,
it,
that makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah.
That's why this one stands out to be a little different on the end.
Great example of a 4th grade student who does their regular classroom teacher as well as their art teacher and PE teacher.
Yeah.
As we go on, this is the students that are excited to go to school, talk about school outside of school, or interested in school. And so a couple of things to look at there is that we have 13 areas in the green and 15 areas in the red. And what highlighted as you go down middle school, it had many reds and go down that column. If you go down the high school, lots of greens though in that area. And interesting that caught my eye too was ELL across the board, elementary, middle, and high school, really favorable in those areas. And so, again, you can look at this by division, or you can look at this by specific subgroups and get different data and dig into that as appropriate and as needed. Here's another way of looking at that information when we compare our subsets against each other, our free versus full students, our black versus white, Hispanic versus white, and ELL versus non-ELL students.
As a reminder, the no gap, right? So this is the one that's most closely aligned of any of the metrics that we don't see a lot of gaps about positive perceptions and school engagement, so.
So as we look at that data, some of the things that we found that stood out, elementary students had the highest favorable perceptions about school engagement. Students had decrease in favorable perceptions about school at the middle school level and the high school level, both at 1%. Black students increased favorable perceptions at the elementary level 5% and high school 2%. Hispanic students had decreases at the elementary level 1% and middle school level 3%. ELL students had increases favorable perceptions about school engagement at the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level. And that high school level is pretty good statistic. They're excited about that. The greatest closure in subgroup activity, which we are always working on, is closing that gap, is at the elementary level and at the middle school level. So that concludes this update. Our next strategic plan update, Focus Area 1 Goal 2 report is coming to you in 2 weeks as we tell more of the story. But at this time, we would ask if you have any questions, need clarification on any of ended with, or any other topics that come up from strategic that you can call any person forward to help answer the question.
Anything for Jay or any other of the presenters?
Just am curious if some of this current new data is being presented to the EDAC. That's already?
We don't roll anything to them prior to you, so they've seen the attendance, they've seen some of the first round data. They've seen some of the employment data that we've had historically, but they will get academic achievement data and they'll get some engagement data sets also. Yeah. All of those things. Give them the information necessary to build good recommendations, get an understanding of what's going on in the system. So.
Jay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
And
you.
thank you to the rest of
Yes.
you all who presented. It's a lot of information. We'll be seeing part 2 and there's not a darn thing we can do about it.
The only
It's coming our
disclaimer,
way.
and I'll throw it out as a disclaimer because I don't know where it's going to land. The only disclaimer I would say is that is contingent upon the department giving us final release of the APR data because we can't release until they give us permission. We did learn that the behind-the-scenes release for first snapshot of that was supposed to happen last week. It's been delayed till this week, so we haven't seen that yet.
Shocked.
I can tell you, can be utterly shocked. they were supposed to give us full release for public release on October 10th. So if a delay happens for the public release that happened for the screened release or embargoed release, that would push after the October
Wouldn't have
meeting.
time to prepare for
And then we would do the November study session. So it's our goal to put it on the 15th. That's what we're striving for, but it's up to the department whether or not we can move forward with that. So we'll be ready if they allow us to be ready, so.
John, why don't you keep going on your superintendent's update?
I will do it. Let's a few things. It's hard to believe, but we are in October, which means first quarter is over in just a few days. October 10th, we will be through one quarter of the school. Parent-teacher conferences are lining up for October 21st through November 4th. So school is full-fledged going. Fluke clinics are happening. We're trying to get after that earlier. You saw some of that data in September and how we can get participation rates up because it does affect attendance, for both staff and students. So they're being offered right now all the way through October 18th. So encourage people to get those taken care of. Hall of Fame, hopefully you have that on your calendar, happen on October 17th with a reception the previous night. Love to have your engagement. We're excited about another awesome class. Choice program parent nights are beginning to happen through the last few weeks of October, and application begins November 1st, and that's also when we kick off our transfer process opportunity throughout the system. Another exciting thing that we happened last week that really aligns to some of the work tonight was ACT prep for diverse upperclassmen, and that was led by some of our team members with 80 participants right here next door. You probably saw that on social media, but some great opportunities to, again, stress college and career and do everything we can to make sure that those scores are great to get them into whatever school that they want to get into, because we know that's an entry barrier sometimes. So those are some exciting updates. Also, just on the operational side, the construction management at risk for Williams is out. Writing responses are due October 15th, and then we will follow up with interview processes with recommendations coming back your way, likely in the month of November. So that's my soup update. I'll just keep on rolling into legislative updates.
Please.
It's really brief. We are obviously just preparing, but it doesn't happen just in November. I can tell you I was in Jeff City this whole meeting on some legislative priorities with the governor's office, trying to understand where they're headed and what we can do to support some of the work, and also align resources when it comes to what the budget's going to look like. The one thing that I would say is a little disappointing, those have been in some conversations, we know is that the formula call is going to be very small this year, which is like $1.5 million. That's statewide call on the formula. With some other institutional tax, it goes up to $10 million, but over the last few years, we've seen a $50-60 million call, which means formula districts have been able to see some increases in programming for staff. Right now, that call is next to nothing, right? And the unfortunate thing is that SAT doesn't get calculated by every other year. So that's a 2-year implication that state resources coming our way are going to be very slim when it comes to formula, or new resources will be very slim. Need to aggressively pursue as we think about this kind of platform issue is transportation, because we know it's underfunded by $200 million, and we put $8 million of our own local funds to fill the gap of what the state is supposed to fund in transportation. So it is time to aggressively, pursue that. Formula calls a little low. Also, we'll be studying the formula aspect and determine if there's anything beyond full funding that we should be advocating for. So those are important things to watch and kind of set the tone for where the session is going to go. I think that's it. More to come, obviously, on them. Give you more next meeting.
Thank you, John. The next item is an opportunity for the board members to offer comments or any discussion. Is there anything that anybody wants to share with the rest of the group? And I will remind you of upcoming meetings. 15th, 16th, and 17th of the month. The 15th is our board meeting. The next day is our reception for the Hall of Fame out at the Conservation Education Center. And then on the 17th is the luncheon. I hope that everybody is signed up for those, all 3 of those, 3 times a week. Anything else that I missed? Please offer opportunities for improvement, and kudos for tonight's meeting. Lena and I discuss those every time we meet to agenda. We'll be doing that soon. Time seems to be flying. Tonight, we do need to go into executive session. The recommended action is that the board meet in executive session to discuss real estate and personnel matters as provided in section 610.021, subparagraphs 2 and 13 of the revised statutes of Missouri.
So moved.
Thank you, Lena. Is there a second? Second. Charles, thank you. Ready to vote? Please vote. In the meantime, I will thank our hangers-on for your attendance and participation tonight. Thank you. Wish you, and we'll see you soon.